Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're just going to give it another minute to let people join and we'll get right started. Hey everyone, my name is Graham Smith. I'm running for the Board of Supervisors here in District 3, and I'm really excited to be having this conversation with residents in Needles. Before we get started, I just want to give you a bit of background on me and let you know why I'm doing this and why I think we can connect a little bit. I live in an unincorporated part of San Bernardino County. I'm up in the mountain regions in San Bernardino, and I really know what it's like to feel like I know what it's like to be a resident who feels like the county doesn't have your back, and I know what it's like to feel forgotten about. And even though we haven't been able to come to Needles in person yet, we are planning a trip in the next couple weeks, so we'll be there in person. But I wanted to take a second to connect with you virtually and let you know that we're thinking about you, and I want to know what's on your mind. We sent out a bunch of texts earlier. We received a lot of responses talking about the CVS that's closing. I know that's a main issue on your mind right now. So I'm hoping we can have a chat about it this evening. Just so you know, there's a chat window on whatever platform you're on, whether it's Facebook or YouTube. I've got a presentation that I'm going to run through, but please drop any questions or comments into the chat at any time. And if we get enough people on, we can just make it a discussion and open it up. So why don't I just get started with the presentation here. So I said, my name's Graham Smith. I am running for the Board of Supervisors here in District 3. I've got a slide on just how big District 3 is in a little bit. But I wanted to start off by talking about what a county supervisor actually does, and then give you some background on myself and why I think I'm a good fit for this role. So I kind of think about this in four main buckets. Approving the budget. This is a big budget. The county has a $10 billion annual budget, so the person sitting in this seat has got to have a lot of confidence and comfort with numbers of that size and scale. Allocating resources. Within the county, there are dozens of departments and tons of cities like Needles that all need resources from the county. And a big responsibility of the Board of Supervisors is figuring out where that $10 billion should go. Approving legislation. A lot of what the county does is implement legislation that comes from either the federal government or the state of California. There is, with so many things, a huge amount of latitude left up to implementing legislation in different parts of the county and different parts of the district, because this is a huge and varied place. And lastly, securing investment. So as a county, our single biggest source of funding is reimbursements from the state of California and the federal government. So a big part of this job is knowing how to secure investment from those agencies, and also working with outside industries and companies that are present in this county. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what the job actually is, because I know it's not a household name, and it's not necessarily a well-known or sexy position on the ballot. You might feel like me, where if you're in a small and more rural part of the district, it is much more important than if you're in a bigger city. So here's a little bit of background on my professional background, and I kind of think about my career as being in two phases. I've got a big finance part of my career, and then small business. So when I worked in finance, what I did is I worked for a company, and I would go out and raise money from stakeholders, put that into a company pot, and then figure out how to allocate that money across a bunch of different companies. So I was what was called a generalist, which meant, excuse me, I didn't have a particular sector that I focused on. So I made a list of companies or industries that I invested in the other day. I got up to 40 and I stopped counting. And what that means is I know a little bit about a lot of different industries and companies, and it kind of translates to those dozens of departments that sit within the county. But I didn't want to do corporate work my entire life, so I left that job about 5 years ago and then started a couple small businesses. One was an online health and fitness startup, another was a topical skincare brand, and through those experiences, I realized just how hard it is to be a small business owner, and just how hard it is to be a small business owner in San Bernardino County. So going back to the role of county supervisor, I want to give you a feel for how my experience pretty closely matches up with what this job actually entails. So one, the budget, it's a $10 billion budget. You got to have confidence dealing with those numbers. In my professional career, I personally raised and invested about $10 billion across hundreds of different companies. And the last company I worked for manages about $400 billion. That's 4 times the size of the GDP of San Bernardino County. So the scale of numbers and figures that we're talking about is something I absolutely have a lot of confidence in. Allocating resources. It was really my professional, I did this job professionally. So it was my job to take that company pot of money, kind of like the county's budget, and then figure out how to allocate it across companies, or like we're talking about here in the county, figure out how to allocate it across county departments. Approving legislation. This is a fast-paced environment, and you need to be able to respond to things quickly. And that was a very, very core part of my skill set when I worked in finance. And last but certainly not least, securing investment. That was a huge part of my job, and something that absolutely translates into this role. Because like I said, a huge part of this job is securing investment from the state of California and the federal government. So that's a whistle-stop tour on the job and my professional background anyway. I'll talk about me personally in a bit. But just want to stop here for a second, see if you've got any questions.
Yeah, so hi everybody. This disembodied voice is, my name is Mark. I'm Graham's campaign manager. I'm running things behind the scenes, which is why I'm not on camera. And I will be relaying the questions and comments that you have to Graham so we can make this more of a conversation. The presentation is really just there to give you guys a little bit of background information, but what we really hope is that this turns into just more of a normal conversation than
Absolutely.
a scripted presentation. We just have that as a kind of backup. So we sent a bunch of texts out earlier today to people in Needles to let them know that this town hall is happening. And Jasmine has made a comment which touches on something that a lot of people responded to our text about, which is Rite Aid. So talk about that, because I know, yeah, it sounds like Needles needs a lot of help.
So this is something I want to learn more about. So at first I thought it was CVS, now it sounds like Rite Aid. So I guess by the way, just so you know, there's a 20-second delay between me talking and seeing the chat in the thread. So if I don't get to your question right away, please don't stress. But I'm really keen to understand more about what has happened and what the history is that's led up to this closure. Because certainly I know what it's like to live in a rural part of San Bernardino County. We are fortunate where we are in the mountain communities. We actually now have 2 pharmacies. It used to be just a Rite Aid, and a CVS just opened, I don't know, about 6 months ago or so. But I know what it's like when you only have one location to go to, and if that's closed or you're worried you might not be able to get to it. Where we are, we face road closures from snow all the time, and it's a real issue. So certainly this is something where I would hope the county would get involved and push for some kind of solution, because especially with how far away you guys are from so many other big cities in the county, I think having no pharmacy is a huge issue. And of course I know there are delivery pharmacies popping up these days, but I don't know what you do in case of an emergency. Like if you need something immediately, then now you're going to be out of luck. So I really want to learn more about this and do whatever I can to try to help.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of the problems that Needles is facing right now, a lot of them seem to stem from the fact that you know, the town is just so far away from the political headquarters of the county, which is not really a good excuse for anything bad that's happening in Needles, right? I mean, it's part of the county, it's part of District 3, it deserves the attention and the resources of any other town.
Exactly.
Yeah, we had a couple of super informative text messages from some people, you know, kind of going into a lot of detail about this problem and about the number of patients that Needles has who are on Medi-Cal. I got one text from a lady called Ellen who said, thank God there are 2 pharmacies in Fort Mojave that will take California Medi-Cal, but that there's a bunch of things that it doesn't accept. So,
understood.
Yeah, I know, Graham, I know you want to just kind of reassure people that, like, Needles, we're very well aware of the fact that Needles has historically been unloved, and to be honest, it's kind of unconscionable that this has been allowed to happen.
We want to do whatever we can to try to fix that situation. I mean, I really go back to what I said at the start. Just so you know, the whole nexus for my candidacy was rooted in the winter storms we had here last year. So I don't know if you would have remembered or read in the news, but we got 10 or 12 feet of snow here in about a week. We were completely cut off from everything. We are in what's called unincorporated San Bernardino County, so we don't have a local city council of our own. Residents were stuck in their houses. I mean, at one point houses started exploding because gas meters were clogged, and we just weren't hearing anything from the county. So what I did at that point is I led a whole coordinated social media campaign just to get the attention of the Board of Supervisors, because we just weren't hearing anything. So believe me when I say I know what it feels like to be completely cut off and completely isolated and totally unloved by the county. Just as Mark was talking, one question that I had, that I wanted to ask you guys is, what's the rest of the healthcare landscape look like in Needles? Do you have an urgent care center? Am I right? And it sounds like the only one is just across the state border. I mean, one thing that I think this county can do a better job of is providing more rural and more mobile healthcare services. And that's certainly something that I want to explore if I'm sitting in the supervisor seat.
Yeah, we have a comment about grocery stores because excuse me, because Needles doesn't have one of those either. Yeah. So
okay, we need to come out, and if people on here tonight can let us know where would be a good place to meet, I really want to make sure that you all know that we care about you and we're thinking about you. So if there's a good opportunity for us to get a group of people together in person, we'll absolutely come out in the next couple weeks.
Yeah. This might actually be a good point at which to talk about, it's one thing to say that you want to help, but I think people in a town like Needles really need to know how you can help. What qualifications do you have that you can bring to being a supervisor that will actually make some changes in a town like Needles compared to just saying, oh, that's terrible, we want to help. So do you want to maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so one thing, and this kind of touches on the job roles and responsibilities. One thing that I think I can really bring to the table here more credibly than other candidates is financial responsibility and financial discipline. I've got a big finance background. I mean, I spend a lot of time going through the county's budget, believe it or not, and I found a lot of areas where I think this county is wasting money and can be allocating those resources a little bit better. And a big part of that for me is making sure we're taking better care of rural communities. So that for me comes in a few different ways. One is making sure we have the county services that provide access to some basic services like healthcare. So we've actually been talking a lot to fire departments around some community paramedicine activities or initiatives rather.
Do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, and that's basically using ambulances to come and treat people at their homes instead of necessarily just having to take them to a hospital or an urgent care center. And it does seem like those trials are going well, and it's certainly something I'd really like to look to expand and explore. And the other thing, and this has come from talking to residents across this district. And actually, I'm just going to flip to the next slide just so you see it. This is a huge district. So San Bernardino County is already the largest county in the United States. District 3, where we all are, is about half the size of that county. It's 10,000 square miles. So getting out and about to everyone in the entire county is really difficult. So one thing we've been discussing with a lot of residents is the network of municipal advisory committees that used to be present across this district. There are still some of them in existence, but as we understand it, so many of them have closed down. And what that means is the county's conduit to so many rural communities has really been closed off. And it's sounding to me like you feel like your voice is not being heard at the Board of Supervisors level and that the county needs to do more to support you. And one thing I'm a huge fan of, particularly coming from the position of being in a rural part of San Bernardino County and knowing what it feels like to be cut off, I really want to reestablish and expand that network of MAC committees so that everyone in this county has a voice.
So some of the information that we got in the text messages was provided by somebody who's on the city council. And it sounds like they don't get a lot of support from the county either, which is shocking because we live in an unincorporated area and we have these municipal advisory committees, which are groups of residents who sort of volunteer their time to supposedly relay information from the community to the county. But Needles has its own fully established, legitimate city council, and it sounds like they can't even get the resources. And I'm sure it's not for a lack of trying. Maybe do you want to talk a little bit about, what you plan to do and how you want to instruct the county to work more closely with city councils? Because this is something that's come up a few times where people think, oh, I live in a city, we have a city council, everything's going to be fine, but it's really not, and the county does need to help.
Yeah, I mean, this has come up a lot talking to people who live in both incorporated and unincorporated parts of the county. There is one of my criticisms of the current Board of Supervisors is they are very quick to say when something is not their problem. So as for instance, we've talked to them about, last winter when we were dealing with all the roads not being plowed. If it was a state road, the Board of Supervisors would say, oh, that's a Caltrans thing, or that's a state problem. And it's kind of the same thing when you're dealing with local city councils that might not have access to some of these state resources. I think what the county needs to do is help facilitate some of these relationships and make sure that local city councils have the support they need both from the county and from the state, because ultimately there are going to be some times where a local city council in Needles might not have the right relationships at the state level that you guys need in order to function properly, but the county can do a much better job to facilitate that. So I'd like to see a lot more collaboration between the county and local city councils, especially if you feel like you're not getting any support. I mean, this to me is pretty unconscionable.
Just a quick message for Sally. Sally, we got a message from, you just said Sally Mendoza Butler, Redlands. Sally, just wanted you to know that the session that is specifically for people in Redlands is going to start at 6 o'clock. So right now we're talking about issues faced by residents in the city of Needles. So if you want to talk specifically about Redlands, please, rejoin at 6 o'clock if you can. Today is not going to be our only session on Redlands. We will have another one. If you're joining because you got a text message from us, the date of the other session is in that text message. So, just wanted to let you know. But of course, you are welcome to stick around and talk about
Absolutely.
the wonderful.
The more the merrier. And we're doing so many of these sessions. This isn't even the only session we're doing for Needles. Like I said, we absolutely want to come out in person in the next couple of weeks, but we have another one of these virtual town halls for Needles as well. So if you're at all interested in what we have to say, please let your friends and family know that we're doing this, because we really want to take the time to hear from everybody.
So we did have a comment in one of the text messages that sort of implied that perhaps, and this is not a good excuse, but perhaps the reason that Needles doesn't get enough attention from the county is because of the small size of its population. And sort of implied that maybe resources are doled out relative to that.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not a good policy, because Needles has a lot of challenges just by virtue of the fact that it's sort of right on the border, not surrounded by any other big towns or cities. It's not like Needles can, tolerate having no grocery store because there's a town, 5 miles over that also has a grocery,
Exactly.
So things like that. Could you just talk a little bit about your background and your experience, professional experience, that would allow you to kind of work with the county to amend any kind of legislation or policies, to account for things like that?
Yeah, and it's both background and professional experience. Also, this is just down to experience of being an everyday resident in a rural part of San Bernardino County. We're really well aware of some of the shortcomings in terms of how the county deals with its residents. I mean, for instance here, because we don't have a local city council here in the mountains, we deal directly with the county for pretty much every aspect of everyday life, whether that's renovating your house and pulling building permits, opening a small business. I talk about this all the time, there's a restaurant just down the road, like literally a 10-person restaurant that has been trying to open for 3 years, but they can't because of all the county's red tape. So one thing I really want to do is focus on making sure that we can make these activities a little bit more easier for residents in some of the unique geographies we have across District 3. Because right now, the county's building codes, regulations, and whatnot are very heavily geared toward life in cities. And I'm talking bigger cities like Redlands and Highland and Yucaipa, kind of down the mountain from where we are here. But they're not geared toward life as a mountain resident or life as a desert resident. So I'm really well aware of the challenges faced by being a resident in a rural part of the county. And I want to make sure that we're implementing some smart legislation to make it easier to live life in a rural part of San Bernardino. And one thing I'm really committed to, if elected to this seat, is much more open and frequent communication. I mean, sessions like this, if you find this useful, this is something I'd absolutely intend to continue, because it sounds like you're feeling pretty unloved, like no one spends any time or focuses attention on you. And ultimately, this is a huge district. It's really hard to get around physically all the time. But I do think we have opportunities to make use of technology and communicate virtually on a more regular basis, just to make sure that everyone's opinions are getting heard.
I just want to apologize to Sally. You are correct. We didn't put the time in the actual text message. You should have received a picture with the schedule on it,
okay.
and the time and the date was circled. But apologies, that is entirely our fault. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Sally. Noted for next time.
Yeah.
We won't make that mistake again.
That is an omission on our part. I'm so sorry. If you can join at 6, we will be talking about Redlands. Otherwise, we hope you can join one of our other sessions. Okay, so we have a question here from Jasmine, who says, what do you know about the weed business here? How do they help Needles? We have more weed than food.
Interesting. So I'm going to ask a question, and again, there's a 20-second delay, so I'd love to hear your take on it. So what I know about the weed business in San Bernardino County is that it is illegal in unincorporated San Bernardino County. So I don't know if the city of Needles has a different regulatory framework for it, and if it is in fact legal, by the city of Needles, because cities can choose to make commercial cannabis activity legal. So if it is, I'm kind of curious to understand if these weed farms are in the incorporated parts of Needles or the unincorporated desert communities in San Bernardino.
A quick Google search, and I don't know if this is correct, but people in the chat hopefully can correct me, that in 2016, Needles voters approved Prop 64, the state ballot measure that legalizes the recreational use of cannabis. So
got it. Okay.
maybe that's now.
Well, I guess legalizes recreational use, but part of my question is dependent on where the actual farms are, if this is part of the concern. And this is something that we've dealt with personally. So we actually spend a lot of time down in Lucerne Valley, the northern part of the desert, just north of where we are here. And as we understand it, there have been, 800 or so illegal cannabis farms that have been, over the last couple of years, closed down by the county. And I'm really curious to get your take on this, because one of the ways I think about it is right now we are spending a lot of money as a county. It's right in the executive summary of the county's budget, talking about how the county spends about $3 million a year enforcing against illegal cannabis. Ultimately, the county has decided that cannabis is illegal, even though it is a legal activity in the state of California. And part of my personal issue with it is, as they've enforced against these illegal weed farms, they've just left a bunch of junk out in the desert. So it hasn't necessarily been done that well, and the county is spending money on this instead of finding smart ways to legalize it and earn the tax money on it. It seems like if there's a big weed growing, community in Needles, maybe there's a missed tax opportunity, a missed revenue opportunity that could get invested back into the community. But admittedly, I'm coming at this fresh, so I don't know what the situation is.
Yeah, I think we also have to kind of weave into this conversation public safety, because
Absolutely.
as has become prominent in the headlines in the last couple of days, these illegal weed farms often do make neighborhoods very unsafe. If the reports are to be believed, cartels are involved.
Yeah.
So how can we balance those two things? Obviously, tax revenue is good, but public safety is extremely important.
Exactly, and I think again, this all comes back to making sure all of our various cities and county departments are well funded, so that all these enforcement activities can actually happen effectively. Because certainly our experience of the enforcement that's happened already is that it seems to be haphazard and it's not done all that well. So if there are genuinely illegal weed activities happening in and around Needles, then that's something I think we need to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of touches on a topic that we've talked about across the county, across the district, with regards to activities that are allowed, not allowed. And one of the things that comes up all the time is if there's a certain activity that you want people to do, then you need to make it as easy as possible. So in the case that you've just talked about, if you want to make weed farms legal and you want these people to, get permits, pay fees, do all of, do everything by the book so that you can then start generating tax revenue, we need to make it as easy as possible.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that goes on to the convoluted permitting processes that we've seen out in unincorporated San Bernardino. Just getting anything simple done seems to be really, really hard.
Yeah. But obviously on the flip side of that, anyone who is not willing to legally participate in this activity, we got to make sure that the police department is well funded.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it does seem kind of criminal to me that you have so many weed farms and not even a single pharmacy. Like this is something that fundamentally needs to change.
Yeah, as Jasmine mentioned, they have more weed than food, which I don't know about Laszlo's hierarchy of needs, but I don't think that's the right way around.
Agreed.
Okay, so we have a comment from Myrna, who says, I have many specialist doctor's appointments and have to drive to Victorville and San Bernardino to get my medical needs. That is a long drive. If we had a touring site to maybe bring more traffic to the town, it seems most businesses are slow and they end up closing. Needles is on Route 66. It has, it should be a little tourist gem.
Exactly. I think there are two different ways to tackle the problem, and I think we can do both at the same time. One is making it more of a tourist destination, and I would really hope that the county can provide some help here and some funding, because ultimately, if the county can provide even a small marketing budget to help Needles market itself as a tourist stop, then it's possible to get more people stopping over, and then therefore more revenue and more services in Needles. I think this also goes back to the whole mobile rural health theme that we've been talking about, which is, I know the county has been trialing some mobile health services, but I am very much a proponent of expanding these as much as possible. And I don't know exactly what specialist appointments you're talking about, but I know there are even mobile scanning trucks that drive around. So to the extent that we can find more specialist services to be available on a mobile basis, maybe not every week, but on some kind of regular schedule, it seems like that might make life easier for people.
I'm just going to sit here and play devil's advocate, because I like to be difficult. All of this sounds great, but it takes money.
It does.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the county's budget and your professional background, and how you, of all of the candidates, are probably the most qualified to be able to find the kind of money that, to fund the kind of things that we talk about, the marketing budget, the mobile clinics, etc.
So this is a boring but a really important part of the job, and I don't know if anyone here has ever attended, either in person or virtually, a Board of Supervisors meeting, but a huge part of this job is approving spend and approving contracts. So in any one Board of Supervisors meeting, there will be dozens and dozens of, sometimes $500,000, $1 million plus contracts. And ultimately what happens is, when you have a budget that is $10 billion a year, I think it's really easy for people to think about some of these $500 and maybe $1 million contracts not being that important. But if each one of those isn't negotiated well to begin with, then small inefficiencies add up to be a pretty big number over time. So one thing I'm really focused on is making sure that all of those contracts that we have as a county are very well negotiated and done as reasonably as possible to make sure that we're not wasting any money. Then there are some other I'm going to call them baskets of the county budget, where I think we have opportunities to save money and reallocate that money to places like Needles. Because by the way, I am certainly not a proponent of raising taxes if we don't have to. I think there are a lot of opportunities to be more efficient as a county and get more for our tax money. So again, I've been spending a lot of time in the county's budget, and there are plenty of questions, like little red flags that rise up as I read through this report. Like I've got a long background in doing this stuff, and I know how to do it pretty well. And I think one thing that we've certainly seen from the current Board of Supervisors is, I don't think any of them right now have the financial background to be able to actually do that. And if we look at what happened, I don't know if you're aware, the old county CEO was actually basically fired about 6 months ago because he completely ran amok in the county. He was having inappropriate relationships, all kinds of almost just egregious behavior.
Allegations of.
Allegations of corruption and financial misconduct, like what have you. And it wasn't really caught until it was too late. And at this point, the county is still cleaning up the mess. And I think it's really important that we have someone sitting in this seat who actually knows what to look for in this budget and knows how to pick out these inconsistencies. So I can tell you, a big part of my priority day one is really spending time in this budget, checking in with each one of these county department heads and saying, hey, can you tell me about this little thing here, because this doesn't make sense to me. And I think if we can do that enough times, there's quite a bit of fat that we can trim off this county budget and then invest in services like mobile health.
It's probably worth, I know it's not the sexiest part of the campaign, but it's probably worth talking briefly about what your old job was and why you say you're qualified to do those things.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it a little bit in the start of the presentation, but a huge part of my job was not just investing money or not just raising and then investing money, but getting really involved in a bunch of different companies. So I would sit on company boards, sometimes for a period of, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, however long my company had that investment. And while I'd sit on those boards, I'd provide perspective and challenge and advice on what I thought a good strategy would be. So it certainly wasn't a hands-off job at all. It was very much getting into the detail. And I think an important part of the skill set in my last job was both being able to look top down, high level at what was going on, to be able to make some changes in terms of, oh, we need to take some money from here and put it over here, but also getting really into the detail of these companies, kind of like the county departments, knowing how to ask the questions to CEOs, to managers, and knowing how to, ultimately knowing how to make things a bit better. So that's really the bread and butter of my professional expertise, and I think it's a skill set that's really lacking on the Board of Supervisors right now.
No questions and comments in the chat right now. We've already talked through quite a lot. Yeah, it really sounds like Needles needs some love, and I know we both live in unincorporated spaces, so we kind of know what it feels like to be ignored by the county sometimes. But I would argue even Needles is probably suffering more than most right now.
Even more than that, I mean, because the one advantage we have being here in the mountain communities is we're physically not too far away from the county headquarters. I mean, if the roads aren't closed and full of snow, we can be down there in 40 minutes or so. It's not a huge mission. So even knowing how cut off we can feel here sometimes, I can only begin to imagine what it feels like to be a resident all the way in Needles, feeling that the county just doesn't have your back and isn't listening to any of your problems. And that's something I really, really want to change. It's really distressing to me to hear this. So please let us know when and where would be a good time to come out. Our campaign schedule in general is we do these virtual sessions during the week, and then we get out and about on the weekends. This weekend, I know we're expecting some snow up here in the mountains, so I don't know if we're going to be completely snowed in and stuck. But hopefully in the next 1 to 2 weeks, we can take a proper trip out, meet as many of you as possible, and really get a feel for what's going on.
We just had a comment from Jasmine saying, "I got this text thinking it was spam." That is not an uncommon response. We swear it's real. We promise. She says, "I read that you plan another town hall. Can you give the councils some more advance notice? We would have loved to hear from them." Yes, this is a tactic that we've kind of developed over the last few months of the campaign with regards to how much notice do people want and need. What we found is most people get the text message, read it, say to themselves, "Okay, I want to come," and then probably forget about it the next day. So what we found is we have the most success getting people to attend if we text the day of.
Pretty much right before.
But Jasmine makes a great point, which is that if we wanted to get some other voices in the conversation, like council members, we would need to give them a little bit more notice. So we will definitely reach out to the council.
100%, and certainly people like council members, if they're up for meeting, we'd love to come down and sit down in person too. So certainly if you have a relationship with any of them and can facilitate an introduction, like any help getting in touch is great. I mean, we'll reach out anyway, but if anyone is willing to help arrange that, that's incredibly helpful.
Yeah, one thing that we learned, and just to clarify for people, I personally think this is a good thing, but this is Graham's first time running for office. He is not a career politician. This is the first campaign that we've run together. One thing that we realized, or that we found out rather, a few months ago was that there are rules about elected officials, council members, communicating with candidates for offices like this via their official email addresses. Yeah. So all of the email addresses that we were able to access through the City Council's website, there are rules in place that sort of prevent city representatives from contacting us with that email address. So it is a little bit difficult for us to get in touch with people via the appropriate channels. I think we have a couple contacts now for some council members, but
perfect.
Like I say, if anyone has numbers or emails that they are appropriate for us to share to get in touch with people like that, that would be great.
Yeah, and we're easy to get a hold of. So if you haven't visited the website yet, if you joined tonight, you'll have a link in the text we sent you. But the website is smithforsb.com. We have an email and a phone number on there, and then additionally we have links to all the various social media platforms we use. We're actually we're very active on social media. We use it as a platform to talk about our stance on issues rather than show us out and about campaigning. So if you're at all interested in the campaign, I really suggest you follow us on social media, and please tell your friends as well. We'd love to get just get to know everyone in Needles a little bit better. So if you found this useful at all in the slightest, please let your friends know. Send them a text, send them an email, and we're easy to find on any of those platforms. So it's website, social media, email. We're here.
Okay, no further questions and comments in the chat. I don't know if there's anything else in the presentation that we want to run through very briefly, or if anyone else has any questions. Obviously, we have a little bit of time left before our Redland session. Hopefully Sally is either still here or returns. Yeah, is there anything else in the presentation that we think is important for us to talk about?
Let me just flip over to this county-wide priorities slide, because I mean we spend a lot of time talking about both local priorities and county-wide priorities, and we've touched on some of this already. But really, one thing I'm trying to bring to this role is financial responsibility. It's something we really haven't seen enough of in this county, and I think you in Needles are really feeling the results of that because you just don't have enough resources or funding. Kind of as a related point, I really want to find ways to diversify the economy of San Bernardino County, because it might not be front of mind for you in Needles, but when you get down to neighborhoods like Redlands and Rancho Cucamonga, Ontario, really this county has way, in my opinion, overinvested itself in the transport and logistics sector. And I think we're setting ourselves up for a real area of exposure and a really big downturn in our economy in the next 5 years or so. And I've got a bunch of social media videos on why I think that's the case. So if you're at all interested in learning more, please go check those out.
Yeah, they're also on the website.
Oh, yes, website, social media, they're all kind of the same.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like Needles has a lot of specific problems for the city, but not. And I don't want to make the situation sound even worse, but we've had this conversation with a lot of people around the county who say, oh, the warehouses are so far away, diversifying the economy isn't really going to impact us that much. Do you want to talk about how that is not quite the case?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I talk about this so much is because the warehouse and the transport and logistics sector is such an important part of San Bernardino's economy. It's by far and away the single largest employer in this whole county. First of all, it's what we call a cyclical sector overall. So the next time the wider economy takes a dip, we're going to feel it pretty hard here in San Bernardino. But also, as we're seeing in real time, a lot of these jobs are really under the threat of replacement by automated technology and robots. Every couple weeks, Amazon is unveiling a new warehouse robot that they claim is not going to take the job of a human worker, but I'm not sure I totally believe Jeff Bezos on that. So I think we're setting ourselves up for a really big area of exposure if some of these 150,000 plus people who work in this warehouse sector all of a sudden become unemployed. We're going to be earning less tax revenue as a county. We're going to be paying out a lot in terms of unemployment benefits, and it's going to be a lot fewer resources available for all of us in other parts of the county and other parts of the district. So it sounds like you're already feeling strained enough as it is, but I think unless we start to figure out how to diversify our economy, I think we're setting ourselves up for a pretty big problem here.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like right now the county probably has the resources to help Needles better, but isn't giving it enough attention.
Yeah.
The problem that happens if the county as a whole, or some of the more prosperous areas of the county start to fail, is that situation changes. So Needles doesn't get the attention still, but the county also doesn't have the resources, even if it wanted to.
Exactly.
Which is obviously twice as big of a problem.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Third on this slide, I think our relationship as a county with the state of California, the federal government, isn't the greatest right now. I don't even know if you would have remembered a couple years ago, there was a measure on the ballot in 2022 to propose or study secession from the state of California, really as a threat to try to get us more resources. It hasn't worked. We're not seeing any more from the state of California. So I think we need to focus on repairing that relationship and finding more productive ways to get more resources for ourselves here in San Bernardino. And lastly, but certainly not least, and I think it sounds like you're going to empathize with me on this point, but restoring trust between the county and its residents. I feel this firsthand here, being a resident in unincorporated San Bernardino County. I know what it's like to feel like the county doesn't have your back, and I think we need to focus on rebuilding that relationship between the county and its residents. Ultimately, the county is here to work for us, not against us. And I think I'm not alone in feeling like I'm in that latter category. I know a bunch of residents around here. It sounds like you feel the same way as well. So those are just a few of my county level priorities. There's not too much more in terms of specifics in the presentation. It's a bit more on kind of me, my background. I mean, the one thing that I want you to know is, to Mark's point, I'm not a politician. I've never had any political aspirations in my life. I haven't been working up to this for my entire career. I'm really doing this because I feel like the county hasn't done a great job of taking care of our communities, and we all deserve better from the county. I really feel like I've got a strong skill set to bring to the table here, and something that's different from what we've seen before. I see this county waste so much money. In the last, 5-10 years, we've seen hundreds of millions paid out in legal fines and settlements. It's really time to stop this waste and start making sure that we spend our tax money effectively, and we're taking care of all of our communities. So for me, this whole run was born out of my experience in the winter storms last year. I became really involved in the local community, really enjoyed taking care of all of us up here in the mountains. And since then, it's grown to be much, much more than that. And I really want to do my part to make sure we're taking care of the residents of all of San Bernardino County, and in particular District 3, because District 3 is not an easy place. It's so big, it's so diverse, and it's really easy to feel like you just don't have a voice in this county. So believe me when I say I'm really here for you. And we will absolutely come out to Needles in person the soonest opportunity we have. So we will, I'm sure it sounds like we've got some contact details, so we'll start coordinating with you. And in the meantime, please reach out if you've got any questions at all. And the only other thing I'd ask is, if you're at all interested in any of this, please just tell your friends and your family. Needles is a small community. I imagine it's pretty tight-knit. So if you text or email even 5 or 10 people that we're doing this, I hope everyone in Needles received our text message this afternoon. But if you could let them know, hey, I joined this session, I found it useful, and just go check out the website, that'd be incredibly useful.
Yeah.
So are there any final questions or comments in the chat?
Yes, we have one question, another comment from Jasmine, just saying from what she understands, it's easier to build in Arizona than it is in Needles. That is not a surprise.
Not at all.
Well, it is in a way, because our current supervisor has a lot of ties to property developers, so you'd think building property and building infrastructure would be high on her agenda, but
I mean,
doesn't sound like it.
Our experience of being residents in San Bernardino County is that it's very much a story or tale of two halves. You have the big property developers who are pretty well catered to, and then you have everyone else. You have all of us residents in small parts of this county who are just trying to make it through, trying to open small businesses. I talk about that little tiny restaurant that's been trying to open for 3 years down the road, and certainly our interface is directly with the county on all this stuff, and the county does not make it easy. And I'm kind of surprised and a little bit bummed to hear it's so hard in Needles, because I figured if you have your local city council, it's a pretty small community. I figured you would have, or the county or the city rather would have a vested interest in making sure that building stuff and opening businesses is just a little bit easier. So look, if the county can do anything to facilitate that, then I want to try to find ways to do that.
And we do have one last question. Obviously, I think, and I know you think, that being a political outsider is an advantage here, just because you are coming at this from the position of a concerned resident. You have the skills to do this job, which is heavily financial. You have a financial background. And I think your motivations are very different from the other candidates running in this race. However, that does present a challenge. So Rosabelle asks, as an outsider, what challenges do you anticipate facing after you're elected, and how would you deal with the seasoned politicians who are already in power? Great question.
Yeah, it is, and I can imagine there will be, or there could be, some reluctance to wanting to work with a complete newcomer. But one thing I haven't talked about that was a huge aspect of my prior career is that it was very highly political. So it wasn't just me deciding on my own what to do. A big part of this job for me was convincing other people that we should do one thing or another, getting them on board, getting committees to vote for things. Building relationships and working with people is a core part of my entire professional career, and I'm really confident that I can build those relationships quickly. And as a case in point, I mean, here I am as a concerned citizen. A year ago, I had no idea I was even going to do this. I've got a very positive professional relationship with Supervisor Rao, who I'm now running against, and I built that through calling her out for not doing a great job in the snowstorms last year. So kind of feel like if I can build that relationship through calling someone out, then it's certainly doable to build positive working relationships with people once actually elected to this seat. So it's like I know that can be a concern, but it's something that I know I can do well.
Yeah, I think it's also an important distinction to make that, you know, one of the priorities I know you've talked to me about is, well, and everybody else on these town halls is, you know, increasing the amount of transparency in the county government, talking to residents more about, you know, why you vote the way you vote on certain issues, and you genuinely do come at things from a perspective of wanting to help people and improve things. So
Absolutely.
I think one advantage you're going to have, you know, when dealing with, as Rosabelle mentions, more seasoned politicians, is the fact that in a kind of odd political way, it's going to be hard for them to vote against you when what you're trying to do is really in the best interests of a lot of people. And if people disagree with your choices, you're going to be, I know, very open and transparent about why you've made those choices. So
that's one thing I've been talking about since I started this run. I talk about this on all these town halls, is when I'm sitting in that seat, I want to be really transparent with you about exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I'm voting the way I am. And one thing I've been trying to do with these town halls and also with the website and social media is give you a lot of insight into how I think, and also what my priorities and agenda are. I want you to feel a lot of confidence that if I'm elected, you know exactly what I'm there to do and exactly what to expect. And certainly everyone who's looked at my campaign, including other Board of Supervisors members and other people in these positions, will feel the same way.
Okay, we have 6 minutes until the Redlands event, so why don't we wrap up? And there are no more questions and comments, so why don't we go to the last slide. People can, you know, take down the email address and the website so they know how to get in touch.
Let me just scroll over here. Okay, so here's the website. You'll have it in the text, smithforsb.com. There's a whole host of information on there. We are the only campaign and the only website, you know, at least we were as of 6 months ago, that's been talking about issues across the district. You'll find a lot of information on my personal background, my professional background, and just the overall agenda I've got for the county. So please spend some time on there, and if you find it interesting at all, please let your friends and family know. So we will do another virtual session for Needles. We will be in person soon, and we will coordinate with everyone offline to figure out when's a good time to come out. But in the meantime, thank you so much for taking the time last minute to join this session this evening, and we can't wait to see you in person soon.